nation. Join us, because if you want to get far, you do it together. Nation. Empower Africa.
This is NTV.
As always, you are just in time for the Nation Leadership Forum. As always, this creates a platform for interaction between members of the state and non-state actors, as well as you and I, the public, to be part of critical conversations shaping our day-to-day life. And tonight we are focusing on matters oil. On August 23, 2020, oil and gas multinational Tullow announced that it would be selling its assets in Uganda to French multinational Total, a sale whose value stood at $575 million. With this transaction, Tullow transferred its interest in blocks 1, 1A, 2 and 3A in Uganda, as well as the proposed East African crude oil pipeline to Total. Back and forth over the value of the transaction and the amount of tax remitted in its regard has elicited mixed reaction as to whether the Ugandan public realized a good deal out of this. It has also brought to visibility questions around revenue management as far as the extractive sector in East Africa is concerned. Are East African countries with budding oil sectors well positioned with the requisite institutions, legal frameworks and infrastructure to optimize revenue management? To delve into this subject, I am joined by Total Uganda's Director for Business Development and Public Affairs, Nathan Paul Morgan, Uganda Revenue Authority's Assistant Commissioner for Petroleum and Mining, Sandra Kaitare, and finally the Tax Justice Network's Africa's Executive Director, Alvin Mosioma. Before we get into this conversation, let's get some remarks from Lydia, who leads Oxfam in the Horn of African region.
Oxfam International is a humanitarian and development organization that works across the globe in a number of different countries. Particularly here in East Africa, we work in Tanzania, Uganda, Ethiopia, Burundi, Rwanda, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and Sudan and South Sudan, as well as Somalia. In this work, we do focus in some of our work from the development side on the issues of natural resources and mineral resources, and particularly extractive industries. This is our interest in this particular session in terms of the rights of citizens and of national governments who in this region all have development policies that are aimed at enabling them to reach middle income status within the next few years. And part of the way in which that economic progress will be achieved is through the extractive industries. And extractive industries, therefore, are a particularly important source of revenue for national governments here in Kenya and in Uganda. And they are important in terms of the money they can generate, which, if used properly, we believe should be going towards the social services, which are essential, especially at this time with the COVID-19 pandemic. We can see how our health systems are stressed, but also in terms of other basic necessities such as provision of water and sanitation services, education, and other different social services that people need to manage their lives, including, of course, social protection at this particular moment. The other issue with respect to extractive industries is the importance of information, transparency of information, sharing of information, ensuring that the government is able to explain to its citizens the types of contracts and agreements it's entering into with these big oil and gas companies. And also ensuring that that information is shared in a way that the communities can understand their rights to those mineral resources, how they're going to access the benefits from them. And thus, we are particularly concerned about transparency and accountability within the extractive industries.
And that was Lydia Zigomo, who is the Regional Director for Oxfam covering the Horn, East and Central Africa, giving some introductory remarks just to usher us into this conversation. And remember, you can be part of this conversation by tweeting at NTV Kenya, at AmbokaJH. The hashtag is NMG Leadership Forum. We certainly will be picking some of your feedback just to feed it into our conversation here and to see what our panelists have to say as far as the questions you have are concerned. Let me just begin by switching over to Alvin Musioma, who is from the Tax Justice Network. Alvin, you've done a lot of work around the extractive sector, looking at revenue management. Just kick it off for us as far as the East African region is looking like, particularly from the oil landscape.
Thank you very much, Julian. Usually, I mean, when discoveries of this nature are made, the question that usually is covered in the media is the question, is it a blessing or a bane? Are we looking at the new discoveries as the pathway for the development, and as the previous speaker was saying, in terms of raising revenues, or is this going to be a curse, as we have seen in many African countries where the blessings of natural resources have resulted to crisis, to even societal breakdown? So this is really the challenge that, or the question that many citizens of the East African countries have asked themselves as Kenya, Uganda discover the oils. Is this going to be a blessing, or is it going to be a curse? And the answer to this really depends on the kind of systems, particularly the fiscal policy systems that governments have put in place to be able to capture revenues out of this. As you know, largely the biggest benefit that we can get out of these kind of natural resources is taxes, is revenues generated through taxing of these multinational companies. But it's not just taxes, also there's expectations that once these companies come in, they will create jobs. They will facilitate linkages with the domestic economy. They will facilitate the transfer of technology. But what happens in many cases, that these companies end up largely operating in an enclave with significant disconnect between the regions where the extraction is happening and the broader economy, which then basically leaves revenue generation as the most important source of benefits that we can get out of these resources. But when we look at the region largely, we see 4 key challenges that I will try to outline, Tom allowing. One, what we see is that in the effort of countries in the region wanting to attract many of these companies, they are providing a wide range of tax incentives, 10-year tax holidays, tax write-overs. You can be able to reclaim losses over years. So you find these companies operating year in, year out without paying a dime to the fiscals because of the kind of tax incentives that they're enjoying. So you find citizens saying, we are seeing all these trucks of either minerals or oil leaving, but we are not seeing where the benefits, and this is really linked to the kind of tax incentives that are being provided, which largely lead to the race the bottom. Particularly in this era of COVID, what we are seeing is that we are likely to see is that governments are going to be even under more pressure from these companies, because the global market oil prices are going to tumble, or they have tumbled already, going up to around $50 a barrel, and this basically increases even more pressure on governments to provide tax breaks for these companies. Alvin,
if I may respectfully intercept, then just hold you at that point. Question here: when you talk about creating what we call a favorable environment, but of course we are trading off with revenues here, tax incentives. It is a very regionally competitive landscape here. If you look, for example, at the oil prospects in Kenya, Uganda as well, and you've seen what has transpired, something like the oil pipeline has become a very emotive issue across the region. Some governments would argue we are justified to try and create the most favorable environment. And maybe as you answer that, could you just please tilt your screen forward a little bit, just a little bit, Alvin?
Yes, true. I mean, tax incentives is an instrument in the hands of government to be able to regulate businesses. It's obvious. I mean, it's not that tax incentives are bad per se, but it's how they are applied. It is the cost-benefit analysis that should inform those tax incentives. And many of these tax incentives are provided without any kind of sunset clauses. So you find companies basically enjoying this wide range of tax incentives without any kind of cost-benefit analysis being carried out. That's one. Secondly, Julian, surveys have been carried out that basically look at what are the motivations for companies deciding their investment destinations, and you'll be surprised to learn that taxation or the kind of taxes that they pay is not one of their top priorities. Tax breaks end up becoming more of icing in the cake. It's the infrastructure they want, is the reliable and affordable energy, is the human resource. It is good governance, is the issues around corruption. All these issues matter much more than tax breaks would do. So I think that tax breaks becomes really the low-lying fruits for governments, that where they should really be investing more in other regulatory, in creating a better regulatory framework, investing in creating accessible and affordable energy, roads, infrastructure, and other things that for companies would be much more beneficial, because of course you want to transport your goods from point A, point B. The fact that you get tax breaks, if you are not able to move your goods, those tax breaks don't really add much value in the first place.
And question there, when you talk about regulatory environments, Alvin, we have seen some efforts, at least in countries like Kenya, Uganda. In Kenya, for example, last year we had the draft Sovereign Wealth Fund bill being published, and looking into the detail, trying to at least indicate or guide how revenues or proceeds from this particular resource would be optimized for the country in terms of the medium, immediate, and long term. Uganda also has their own framework as far as this is concerned. Don't you think we are in a step in the right direction as a region?
Definitely, I think that the government is taking some baby steps in the right direction, but sometimes these baby steps end up becoming one step, 2 steps forward, 1 step backward. And I'll give you an example. On one side, I think that there's been effort to try and streamline some of the processes in terms of business registration. The recent measures by government of introducing beneficial ownership registry, the investment in IT, all these are really, I think, very, very important steps that the government is taking. But on the other side, on the same side, governments are negotiating double tax agreement with jurisdictions that we consider to be very dangerous, that creating a treaty network that is most likely undermine the very effort they're investing in. So, and these, I think, the colleagues in Uganda will probably speak much more about this. Like studies that have shown that many of the investments that are being done, particularly in the oil sector, are investments that are being routed through tax havens, and these investments are being routed through jurisdictions that have signed double tax agreement with countries in the region, Mauritius, Cayman Islands, Bahamas, and others that have globally been recognized as tax havens. And the reasons that these investments are being routed through these jurisdictions is purely for tax planning or for tax avoidance purposes. So you find on one side that there are particular mechanisms or regulatory frameworks that are being put in place to support attracting investment on one side, but then on the other side you find government again shooting itself on the feet, negotiating very poorly negotiated treaties with jurisdictions such as Mauritius. As you might know, Julian, we have been fighting the Mauritius DTA for over the last 5 years, but specifically for those reasons about how they create then loopholes for tax avoidance and tax evasion.
And when you look at the nature of production sharing agreements, well, of course, one of the key concerns we normally have is, are they structured in a manner that one is best in the interest of the public? For example, as far as disclosures are concerned, when we are entering some of these deals as the countries with the host minerals and the multinationals who are coming into the region?
Indeed, I mean, the fiscal terms establish a broad framework that determine how much of the divisible costs will be shared between the company and the government. And of course, rightly so, companies come here because they want to make money and they want to generate revenue out of it, and it's their right to do so. But the challenge we have on one side, Julian, is that many of these contracts are very secretive. It's really, really difficult to access many of these contracts. That's one. And secondly, the point I was raising about how you have the ownership of this country, or many of these companies being endowed. You have opacity both in contracting but also in the ownership. Kenya has, for example, a total of sent a total of 41 petroleum licenses over the last 8 years. 17 of the parent companies that own these petroleum rights are belong to subsidiaries that are registered in tax havens. And these are according to studies that have been carried out by colleagues, for example, from the Kenya Oil and Gas Platform, that basically indicate that yes, it's good to sign these sharing agreements, but at the same time, you need to ensure that you know who you are dealing with. You're not ending up in a situation of a Russian doll. You are signing a contract with one company, but then the beneficial owner of that company is another company that is registered in Mauritius or in any other tax haven. And we saw this in the case of the expose that was done during the Panama Papers, where, as you remember, when Heritage Oil sold its stake to Tullow Oil for over $1.5 billion, it was supposed to pay a total of over $400 million. And what did Heritage Oil do? They overnight shifted their residency from Bahamas to Mauritius for the pure purpose of wanting to take advantage of the Uganda Mauritius double tax agreement and avoid paying the capital gains tax that was owed to the Ugandan government. And the government fought this and won the case. And this is just an example and of in terms of how these companies can be able to structure themselves for the purpose of avoiding paying the rightful share of taxes they should pay.
And Alvin, now that you've mentioned the transaction that involved Heritage Oil and Tullow, let's just cross over to what happened recently between Tullow and Total, still in Uganda. What was your assessment? Of course, this has elicited so much concern around the tax that was remitted, and there was a bit of back and forth between the transacting parties and the government, as well as the Uganda Revenue Authority. What is the general feel around this?
I think that really the bigger question really there is, again, coming back, is around the revenue sharing, agreement. And largely what happens in cases like this is that when these sales are done, many of these transactions are routed through tax havens. They are routed through jurisdictions that provide secrecy and provide low taxation. So what happens at the end of it all is that while under the table, what happens is that many of these companies are using the schemes in between the double tax agreement, particularly in the case of Uganda, the very, very regressive double tax treaties that exist between Uganda and the Netherlands, I think is one that would have significant impact on our colleagues in the civil society sector in Uganda. This is one of the issues that they have been raising about the dangers that the DTA between Mauritius and between Uganda and the Netherlands poses, in particularly when you have transactions happening here and these companies are supposed to be paying capital gains taxes, but then the double tax agreement says that this double tax, the capital gains taxes are supposed to be charged at source, and many a time this the source is in the Netherlands, where these capital gains taxes are not collected. So achieving what you can call a double non-taxation in cases like that.
And just before we take a break, Alvin, I mean, to be fair, many of the multinationals will tell you that these are part of the contracts we entered right from the outset. It really is a burden of disclosure on the side of the host country. Don't you think it's a fair argument?
Sorry, I didn't hear that. The line was breaking.
Alvin, my question is, many of the multinationals will tell you that it largely is about the contracts they entered right from the outset. So maybe the burden should be on the disclosure of the side of the governments with their people, as opposed to begrudging the multinationals. Don't you think it's a fair argument?
Rightly so. Yes, rightly so. I would fully agree with that. I mean, the responsibility of contract transparency rests with government. These are public resources. These are resources that are owned by the public, and I think that when you are signing contracts with these companies, it's really very, very critical that these contracts are put to public scrutiny. And I think in the case of Kenya, this is one of the things that we have been fighting, pushing again with the Kenyan government, that there's really need to ensure that if those governments are above board, then there is really no need to keep them secret and put them in public scrutiny. So that's some of the issues that we raise, which then when government sees that the says you guys are arguing because you don't have the correct information, then we say, please give us the information. Why are you keeping this information secret?
All right, and that point by Alvin takes us to a short break. Remember, this conversation will be back now with a full panel where we have Nathan Paul Morgan from Total Uganda, as well as Sandra Kaitare from the Uganda Revenue Authority. Don't touch that dial. We'll be back with more.
Asante sana. Sasa, ni nini kingine ambacho unaweza kumfanyia msichana wetu?
Kila kitu. Hata kufua nguo na Ariel mpya. Unaniamini sasa?
Ariel huondoa madoa sugu kwa mwosho mmoja. Ijaribu leo uamini.
I have to admit, I didn't like Sukuma Wiki when I was growing up, but now I've created a way to make Sukuma Wiki tastier and meatier. I simply add 2 Royco beef cubes, and the end result is a rich, meaty flavor. And today, I have brought along my harshest food critics for a taste test. My kids.
More, please!
Royco beef cubes. Add 2 small cubes for a big, meaty taste.
Do your gums hurt?
Yeah.
Does your toothpaste contain sage, eucalyptus, myrrh, chamomile?
All that in one toothpaste?
Yes, try Colgate Herbal. Colgate Herbal contains nature's best herbs and Colgate's fluoride technology to give you strong teeth and healthy gums.
Ah, Colgate Herbal.
Let's go. Colgate Herbal for strong teeth and healthy gums naturally.
Do more to protect yourself and family from viruses that remain on the clothes. Separate laundry that has been exposed and do not shake to minimize the possibility of dispersing the virus through the air. Soaking your laundry in water and hand washing powder does more to kill germs than just a normal wash. After washing, dry your clothes in direct sunlight.
They say we do the expected. We say we're more than you expect. Sunlight, more than you expect.
Honestly, babe, what is chai bila maziwa?
I know, darling. Like in this lactose-free milk. Is it even real milk?
Why don't you ask the expert? Me! Gold Crown lactose-free milk is 100% natural cow's milk. The only difference is that the lactose in the milk has already been broken down, making it easier to digest. So no more funny feelings in the tummy.
Wow! And it tastes just like regular milk.
Because it is. And you've heard it from the cow's mouth.
What a relief. Thank you, Gold Crown.
If regular milk makes you feel uncomfortable, try Gold Crown lactose-free milk. Milk that loves you.
GoTV's everyone's favorite place this festive. A place to connect.
Showtime.
A place of endless possibilities. A place of victory. A place where friendship means everything. Where you find love in its purest form.
GoTV's everyone's favorite place this festive. Download my GoTV app to easily manage your account on the go. Stay connected for the best of local and international entertainment for the whole family. GoTV. Love it.
With the Stay Soft refill, saving money is as easy as snip, pour, mix with water and shake. Stay Soft refill. It's 2 liters of Stay Soft for up to 30% less.
When they flip and roll and start to crawl away, tape diapers can be hard to put on. Then it's time for all-round fit Pampers pants. Easy to pull on even when they're moving around for a great fit and up to 12 hours of dryness. And easy to remove. Just tear the sides, lift away, roll up the pants and you're all done. Now available in size 6. Pampers. Love, sleep and play.
Nivea Men Deep Antiperspirant with the power of black carbon formula. 48-hour protection from sweat and bacteria. For a deep, clean feeling that lasts. New Nivea Men Deep Antiperspirant. Nivea Men. It starts with you. Official sponsor of Real Madrid.
The Aerial Challenge is moving across Kenya, improving Kenyans' lives by saving them money, offering brilliant stain removal in one wash.
Wino ni mojawapo wa madoa sugu ambayo hayatoki kwa nguo, sio?
Let us see which detergent removes stubborn stains.
Na tofauti kwa hizi vitambaa zangu mbili. Kitambaa gani imeokoa pesa kina mama? Napenda Aerial kwa sababu mwosho wake ni mmoja tu. Hata ndio hii nimenunua mara yangu ya kwanza.
Watch out for the Aerial Challenge coming to a town near you.
Every spoonful of Nutri comes loaded with the necessary vitamins, protein and minerals for you and your family to become healthier and stronger. Pick up a pack today from your nearest store. Nutri. Every spoonful counts.
Welcome back to this edition of the Nation Leadership Forum, where we are focusing on revenue management in the extractive sector, particularly focusing on oil. And of course, we have our panel, Nathan from Uganda Total, and of course, Sandra Kaitare from the Uganda Revenue Authority, as well as Alvin Mosioma, who is with the Tax Justice Africa Network. And before the break, we looked extensively at a number of issues, including the production sharing contracts. I want to cross over to Nathan from Total. Nathan, Total has been in the subject of this discussion for quite a while, following the absorption of the assets from Tullow Oil. So many questions around the revenue sharing. We would like just to give you an opportunity to give your side of the assessment of this matter.
Yeah, I think I didn't catch everything that the first speaker said, that Alvin said, due to some technical issues. So I apologize for that, but thanks for the opportunity to speak and to be part of this discussion. What I would say from the outset, and I think it's probably key, it runs through the thread of what Alvin was saying, and it also runs through the center of what Lydia was alluding to in her video message. It's something that we as a company subscribe to, and that's really transparency. We think transparency is key when it comes to this issue of revenue management by host governments and revenue sharing between private companies in the extractive industries sector and the governments. So from a Total perspective, we've been an active and a member of EITI, which is the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, since 2002. We fully support Uganda's membership in that organisation. Uganda has recently become an implementing member, which effectively requires it to fulfil certain obligations or guidelines with respect to transparency. In addition to that, what I would say is, Total as a group actually publishes the payments that it makes to host governments. So anybody watching at home tonight can go online right now. They can go to the Total website. They can download our registration document, and they can see exactly what we pay to the governments in the host countries that we're working with. And that's quite a detailed breakdown of all the payments that are made. So I think transparency is something that we advocate for very, very publicly, and we work with all the host governments that we're engaged with to try and promote that as a key principle. And as I said earlier, that's something that we've been doing now for almost 2 decades. And I think that is sort of a cornerstone of helping inform this debate properly. When people have access to the contracts and the right level of information and the payments are being made, then it's clearly easier to have an informed debate about this subject. Okay. The other topic I would spend some time on is also tax.
Let me hold you at that, Nathan, and just cross over to Sandra to give her thoughts as far as whether Uganda got the best deal from this transaction of Total selling its assets to, or rather Tullow, I should say, selling its assets to Total. Sandra, you sit at the Revenue Authority. What are your thoughts on this?
Thank you very much. Well, I did not hear the previous speakers, so I do not know where to start. But anyhow, where I sit at the Uganda Revenue Authority, we are happy with the transaction. We were able to close the transaction in line with the income tax laws, and as a country, we are being able to close this transaction means that we can move on to develop our oil and gas reserves, and move towards poverty alleviation in this country. So what I'd like the viewers today to know is that Uganda did collect taxes on the transaction in accordance with the Income Tax Act, and the correct revenues were collected. As a matter of fact, we recently received about $23 million, which has been paid by the companies.
All right. Just to get some clarification from you, Sandra, before I cross over to another panelist, there was a bit of back and forth for those of us who follow this transaction regarding the capital gains tax. If you could just shed some light into this and why this was the case.
Yes, of course, there's a back and forth. There were issues as regards what would be deductible for tax purposes and what would not be deductible. But I must say that the government of Uganda and the joint venture partners arrived at a win-win situation where we were able to close the transaction with a win for both Total and Uganda. And as regards the back and forth, that is expected because as Uganda, we shall try to get the best deal out of this farm down. We've had a history of being ruthless at collecting taxes. We were the first country, if maybe among the first countries to collect capital gains tax on a farm down, maybe the first African country to collect capital gains tax on a farm down. So I must say we put in our all to this, and yes, once again, I must say we collected the correct taxes, and our biggest objective is to ensure that the reserves come out of the ground and decisions that have been made were in the best interests of this country.
All right, let me just cross over to Alvin. Alvin, Nathan mentioned something which is very important, and that is membership to the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative. Uganda is now a member of this. What are your assessment in terms of how this changes the game when it comes to disclosure and accountability as far as management of revenues from extractive industries is concerned, Alvin?
So I think that the EITI process has, to a large extent, contributed to bringing some transparency into the sector, particularly the extractive sector, in terms of ensuring that companies or countries are publishing their records in terms of the financial records of the revenues that they are receiving from mining companies or from oil companies, which I think is a good step. But Julian, the point is that if the bigger question really is that if Uganda publishes and says, then we can take you back to the example of the contestation with the heritage oil. If Uganda had lost that case and indicated that from the sale to tallow oil, we didn't collect any revenue out of it, that would have met the criteria of the EITI, because the government didn't get money, but it would not have looked at the money that the government could have received as a result of the kind of tax avoidance schemes that tallow oil was trying to push. So I think the EITI, in terms of shedding some light, it has taken some extent, but it does need to go much deeper in terms of not only the revenues that government are getting, but also looking at have you created structures as companies? And I was giving an example of investments in Kenya in the oil industry, and it's no different in Uganda. It's no different in the whole East Africa. That many of the investment into the natural resources are routed through tax havens, and when that happens, these companies will be able, of course, declare that we made losses, and that will be made public, but the rightfully owned revenues will not have been captured. So I think that EITI is good by itself, but it has got its limitations because it does not go deep enough in terms of ensuring that our companies actually are declaring the rightful profits and that they paying the rightful share of the taxes that they should have paid. So I think that many a times companies have used EITIs as a badge of honor to say, okay, look, we are part of the EITI, we are declaring what we are giving governments, but they are not explaining, for example, if you're a Dutch company, why are you routing your investment through Mauritius or through Bahamas or through the Cayman Islands? For what purpose? Or what are your ownership structures? You find that it is a spider web. Company A owns company B, which owns company C, and between those companies, there's a lot of intra-company transactions that are happening that are for the pure reasons of trying to shift profits.
Let me hold
secondly,
you
I must commend, I think, the colleague Oh, sorry.
Yeah, let me hold you there, Alvin. Let me hold you there, Alvin. I'll come back to you for more on that. I should say at this point that we did make an invitation to Tullow Oil to be part of this conversation, but that did not happen. So this conversation is happening in their full knowledge, and they're welcome to be part of it. Let me cross over to Nathan. Nathan, before we move to Sandra, you were mentioning something about tax remittance by multinationals. If you could pick up from there, Nathan.
Yeah, in fact, it's good because, I mean, you'll have to indulge me for a couple of seconds because I just want to come back to a couple of things that Alvin said that I think it's important to be clear about. So the EITI, I wouldn't regard it in any way as a superficial or a kind of lightweight piece of governance or organization that's providing a certain amount of oversight when it comes to transparency. If you actually look through the 7 requirements of the EITI, you'll see an oversight type requirement by a multi-stakeholder group that's made up of bodies from the government, civil society, the companies themselves. And so it brings all interested stakeholders into the conversation about revenues and about transparency. There's also, I mean, as well as disclosure of the contracts so that people can understand what's been negotiated by the government and if it represents a fair share. That is put on the table as well. There's also a requirement in terms of access to data. And that's important because it really gives multi-stakeholder industry and understand what a government could.
I have to apologize for the quality of connection we're having with Nathan there. We'll be getting back to him. I think he's back. Nathan, if you can continue, please.
Yeah, so that's the first thing. I mean, I would really encourage everyone who wants to understand this deeper to really look into the EITI documentation and see that there's real teeth to that. And then just coming to tax specifically, again, if you so care to do so, you can go to the Total website and you'll actually see our tax policy. So we're very committed to paying our fair share of tax. I think it's important to understand and be clear that when Total enters a country to do any form of development, but especially in oil and gas development, it's entering into a multi-decade relationship. So it's just something we can't consider to pursue some aggressive temporary tax strategy. We're committed to paying our fair share of tax. We understand that it's vital for the host governments and for socioeconomic development. I think in 2019, you'll see very clearly that we signed up to the B-Team responsible tax principles that are very much focused on paying a fair and reasonable share of tax and being very transparent about it. Again, if you give me a few seconds, I think we also have to look at revenue sharing across the piece. So there's tax, there's the investment that's made by the companies to develop these projects. There's the royalty, which passes to the government, and there's also profit oil, which passes to the government as well. And if you actually were to do a benchmarking in the case of Uganda, in terms of the amount of profit it takes from its oil and gas resources, you'll find that over 76% of profit actually ends up in the petroleum fund of the Ugandan government. And so this notion that somehow we've got some sophisticated tax strategy that seeks to place our branches in some sort of tax haven to avoid remitting funds to the government is really one that in the case of Total, at the very least, simply doesn't apply. And there's public documentation that people can access right now that will support effectively what I've just shared with you.
Okay. Okay, Nathan, just a quick write-in question here for you that if you look at the production sharing contracts, many a time the question being raised is not so much on the tax being remitted, but really the corollary engagements that the companies, multinationals would have, for example, environment, skills transfer. That's where the question tends to be largely. Do you feel on your part as Total that you are up to par as far as this is concerned?
No, I think that's a good subject. Definitely, what we would say, and our experience in Uganda, which is a very positive one, is the strategy that we have is based on the fulfillment of effectively the guidelines, the national content guidelines provided by the government, and the laws of the land, I would say. So what we look to do in this regard is, obviously, to the extent that we can use local competence that's ready and available, we use it. Where there's perhaps a competency which needs a marginal amount of development or training, then we look to support that development and training. Where there's perhaps a more sophisticated or complex technology where there's an international player that's required, then we look to bring an international player, but on a joint venture basis. So there's knowledge transfer between that international entity and the Ugandan entity. And then we also promote knowledge transfer and engagement with local suppliers on an ongoing basis. So just as an example for us to work with, in the development phase of the Ugandan project, we anticipate that about 20 million man-hours will be undertaken in Uganda by Ugandans, and there'll be around 1 million man-hours of training provided. And those are just our initial estimates. Obviously, as we attract or subcontractors come to work on the project, that number then grows exponentially as they all quite often have their own local content and capacity development programs.
Okay, let me hold you there, Nathan, and cross over to Sandra. Sandra, a lot of times the concern that is raised is that whereas we might be raising the tax revenue as required, the question is tax avoidance, where the law and loopholes in the law are manipulated by companies now to not remit, ideally, what they should. Is this a challenge you're facing? And if yes, how are you confronting it as the Revenue Authority? Sandra, you hear me?
You were breaking. I did not hear the question. Please repeat the question.
No problem. The question is, many times the question is around tax avoidance. So there are loopholes in the law which are manipulated by multinationals or whichever companies to not remit what they are required.
I did not hear repeat the question.
Yes, I'm repeating the question, Sandra, if I may. That the concern a lot of times is around tax avoidance. Is this a challenge you're confronting, and how are you dealing with it as the Revenue Authority?
I didn't catch that.
All right, I think we're having a challenge, and we'll try to get the proper connection to Sandra. But maybe just to throw that question to Alvin. Alvin, the issue of avoidance is a big concern as far as this is concerned. How significant would you say it is in this region, Alvin?
Well, I can cite the most recent statistics that came out of a recent study by the UNCTAD, where they estimated that the continent at large loses about $89 billion annually as a result of this phenomenon called illicit financial flows, and a big chunk of that being through aggressive tax avoidance. Really, I think if you look at the purification of tax treaties with tax havens, I think that points you in the direction that aggressive tax avoidance is a big issue in the region, combined, of course, with the weak legislative frameworks that we have across the region in Kenya and Uganda. In terms of the laws are constantly playing catch up Some of these treaties are outdated. They go back. Some of them will go back to pre-independence. But even the ones that are being negotiated now, they are being negotiated so poorly that they create avenues for they basically incentivize tax avoidance. If you have a situation where, like the case again particularly in the area of royalties that the previous speaker was speaking about, the area of capital gains tax, management fees, and other areas, you find that the double tax agreement that are being negotiated and signed between the countries in the region and these tax havens provide incentives or loopholes for aggressive tax avoidance, where you find it is basically creating a treaty shopping mechanism where countries basically are going through if I want to invest in Uganda in the oil sector, which treaty basically is the best for this kind of transaction, and then you find either you have one subsidiary registered in Bahamas and the other registered in Mauritius, and so it is a big issue, and that's why actually we have been pushing and calling for countries in the region. And I think in this case Uganda has been really pretty receptive. As you might know, they also put a moratorium on their treaty with Mauritius shortly after the Panama Papers came out, trying to revisit and renegotiate. And it's not just
Alvin,
Uganda.
I have to hold you there.
Yeah. Yes.
Alvin, I have to hold you there. We take a short break. We'll be right back with a lot more on this conversation.
Wanasherehekea miaka 20 na wewe. Piga star 444 star 20 hasi. Tumia shilingi 20 pekee utunukiwe 20 minutes na 20 MB.
I wish I could have soft and glowing skin.
New Geisha Black Soap with activated charcoal to give you soft and glowing skin. New Geisha Black Soap and New Geisha Moringa.
For a better tomorrow, don't forget to do the 1, 2, 3 with Colgate every night.
Asante sana. Sasa, ni nini kingine ambacho unaweza kumfanyia msichana wetu?
Kila kitu. Hata kufua nguo na Ariel mpya. Unaniamini sasa?
Ariel huondoa madoa sugu kwa mwosho mmoja. Ijaribu leo uamini.
I have to admit, I didn't like Sukuma Wiki when I was growing up, but now I've created a way to make Sukuma Wiki tastier and meatier. I simply add 2 Royco beef cubes, and the end result is a rich, meaty flavor. And today, I have brought along my harshest food critics for a taste test. My kids.
More, please!
Royco beef cubes. Add 2 small cubes for a big, meaty taste.
The aerial challenge is moving across Kenya, improving Kenyans' lives by saving them money, offering brilliant stain removal in one wash.
Wino ni mojawapo wa madoa sugu ambayo hayatoki kwa nguo, sio?
Let us see which detergent removes stubborn stains.
Na tofauti kwa hizi vitambaa zangu mbili. Kitambaa gani imeokoa pesa kina mama? Napenda Ariel kwa sababu mwosho wake ni mmoja tu. Hata ndio hii nimenunua mara yangu ya kwanza.
Watch out for the aerial challenge coming to a town near you.
How powerful is the healing power of Vaseline? We applied Vaseline jelly to one leaf, the other we left alone. After just a few days, the difference is visible. Nothing locks in moisture better to keep skin restored. That's the healing power of Vaseline.
Asante sana. Sasa, ni nini kingine ambacho unaweza kumfanyia msichana wetu?
Kila kitu. Hata kufua nguo na Ariel mpya. Unaniamini sasa?
Ariel huondoa madoa sugu kwa mwosho mmoja. Ijaribu leo uamini.
This is NTV.
Tonight, 1,459 new infections, 17 more deaths, and tributes to fallen heroes.
It is quite devastating that the care that you give, you cannot receive it.
Lost on the COVID-19 front line. Also tonight, court rules the government out of order for closing down schools and orders a resumption of in-person classes for all learners in 60 days. Plus, there's no let-up in the bloodletting in troubled Kapedo.
And the level of impunity where it has reached now is even too much.
The guns are out, disturbing the fragile peace, and 4 people lay dead when they went silent. And also tonight, another fine mess as the NMS and Nairobi County squabble over parking revenue. But the hefty fines for non-compliance are taking a toll on motorists.
Na sisi hatuna pesa. Hata pengine unaachia ngari na mkubwa, mdosi wako ule amekuandika kazi. Amekuambia shika hii 200 ulipe.
To help fight the spread of coronavirus, learn Lifebuoy's hand washing habits. Wash hands with soap or use an alcohol-based hand sanitizer. Together, let's help fight the spread of coronavirus in Kenya.
In Kenya, 1 in 2 children suffer from cavities. Brushing with Pepsodent removes bacteria and repairs tiny holes before they become cavities. Because every smile matters.
Asante sana. Sasa, ni nini kingine ambacho unaweza kumfanyia msichana wetu?
Kila kitu. Hata kufua nguo na Ariel mpya. Unaniamini sasa?
Ariel huondoa madoa sugu kwa mwosho mmoja. Ijaribu leo uamini.
To protect yourself and family from viruses that remain on the clothes, separate laundry that has been exposed and do not shake to minimize the possibility of dispersing the virus through the air. Soaking your laundry in water and hand washing powder does more to kill germs than just a normal wash. After washing, dry your clothes in direct sunlight.
They say we do the expected. We say we're more than you expect. Sunlight, more than you expect.
Close Up Deep Action with antibacterial formula and deep cleaning gel keeps your teeth clean and protected. Close Up Deep Action. Enjoy long-lasting fresh breath and more.
To help fight the spread of coronavirus, learn Lifebuoy's hand washing habits. Wash hands with soap or use an alcohol-based hand sanitizer. Together, let's help fight the spread of coronavirus in Kenya.
When they flip and roll and start to crawl away, tape diapers can be hard to put on. Then it's time for all-round fit Pampers pants. Easy to pull on even when they're moving around for a great fit and up to 12 hours of dryness. And easy to remove. Just tear the sides, lift away, roll up the pants and you're all done. Now available in size 6. Pampers, love, sleep and play.
The aerial challenge is moving across Kenya, improving Kenyans' lives by saving them money, offering brilliant stain removal in one wash.
Wino ni mojawapo wa madoa sugu ambayo hayatoki kwa nguo, sio?
Let us see which detergent removes stubborn stains.
Na tofauti kwa hizi vitambaa zangu mbili. Kitambaa gani imeokoa pesa kina mama? Napenda Ariel kwa sababu mwosho wake ni mmoja tu. Hata ndio hii nimenunua mara yangu ya kwanza.
Watch out for the aerial challenge coming to a town near you.
Every spoonful of Nutri comes loaded with the necessary vitamins, protein and minerals for you and your family to become healthier and stronger. Pick up a pack today from your nearest store. Nutri, every spoonful counts.
Welcome back to the tail leg of the Nation Leadership Forum, where tonight we are focusing on revenue management as far as oil is concerned in the East African region. And I'm told we have Sandra back on air. Sandra, if you can hear me, my question before we lost you was tax evasion is one challenge, tax avoidance is another. How do you think we can best combat the challenge of avoidance by companies engaged in the prospection of minerals?
Thank you very much. Of course, tax avoidance is legal and tax evasion is illegal. So what's the best way we can combat tax avoidance in the extractive industry? In the extractive industries is primarily we need to look at maybe at the beneficial ownership of these entities, because most of the avoidance mechanisms are through treaty shopping. So most of these multinationals will register their companies as letterbox companies in the Netherlands and other countries that are tax havens. And so they will try to minimize the taxes that they'll pay in the source country as much as possible. So the best thing we can do is what Uganda is doing currently. Actually, we are renegotiating some of the double tax agreements. For instance, the Netherlands double tax agreement, and we are trying to carve out extractive industries. We're trying to carve out oil and gas out of what is covered by the DTA, by the treaties. So. But of course, with oil and gas, we have a challenge because we have stabilization clauses in the production sharing agreements. Yeah. So what basically happened is that even if we were successful in carving out oil and gas right now, oil and gas companies out of the treaties right now, is that because we have a rebalancing kind of stabilization clause, it would mean that indeed we would have to put the oil companies back in the same economic position they were in when they signed the PSLs. So right now, basically, it is around looking at beneficial ownership and trying to curb tax avoidance using that.
Okay. Crossing over to Alvin, the issue of treaty shopping keeps on popping up in this conversation. And of course, you and I have had this conversation before. The naysayers will tell you that you are throwing out the baby with the bathwater because DTAs by themselves are not bad. It is the manner in which they are structured, Alvin. Don't you think that's a fair argument?
It's true. DTA by themselves are not bad. They are bad when they lead to double non-taxation. And this happens largely when we are having treaties that are signed with jurisdictions that are considered as tax havens. And I'll give an example. You know, the East African community has been negotiating and actually have a regional DTA in place that should have been ratified over 5 years ago and still in the shelves because one of the member countries is yet to ratify it at the national level. So for countries that are particularly contribute to the regional integration, DTAs, particularly within African countries, to facilitate investment and ensure that companies are not being taxed twice within the region is a good thing. But the problem comes in, as the colleague from Uganda Revenue Authority was saying, one, when you have opacity in corporate transparency, when you have companies that are operating like Russian dolls, where company A owns company B, owns company C. So you're signing a contract with one company, but this company has got several subsidiaries spread across different tax havens. And between those companies, between those subsidiaries, there's intra-company transactions happening that lead to aggressive tax avoidance. That becomes a problem. And I think here solutions lie in revisiting, and this one really commend the Ugandan government in terms of wanting to revisit the DTAs that have been signed both with Mauritius and the Netherlands, because they are known to be providing huge opportunities for aggressive tax planning or aggressive tax avoidance, if you so wish. And then, of course, the work around the beneficial ownership, transparency, ensuring that there's public data on who are the actual owners of these companies, who are the people that are making decisions behind, like who are the beneficial owners of this company. This really is very, very important if you want to curb the aggressive tax evasion, particularly tax avoidance.
Okay, and Nathan, let's shift focus a bit. COVID-19 has thrown a curveball not just to all other industries, but also extractives. We have seen delay in projects. We have seen force majeure clauses by some players. We have seen deferrals of the final investment decisions. How has this impacted you?
Sorry, Alvin, you broke up. I think you were asking me how COVID-19 has impacted me. I think you mean how's it impacted our activities here in Uganda. I have to say, I mean, obviously it's been a complicated time for everybody, and I'm sure for everybody watching that found themselves in a situation that nobody would have anticipated on the 1st of January 2020. So I can't say that it's a period that has been easy. In terms of our activities in Uganda specifically, though, we've still been able to make progress. As we've discussed, we managed to close the Tullow transaction, which I think Sandra put it very well. I think it's a win-win from a government perspective and from the company's perspective. I mean, Tullow can make their own comment, but effectively, I think that transaction has allowed us to unlock the project in Uganda and to be able to move forward. We've managed to relaunch the call for tenders despite the difficulties of this period, and so that's a real testament to our technical teams that they've been able to do that despite the issues. In addition, and I think fairly significantly, we've managed to sign a host government agreement with the Ugandan government for the East Africa crude oil pipeline. We've also managed to sign more recently, or initial rather, I should say initial, these documents, which is effectively agree the main terms of them. We've managed to initial a host government agreement with Tanzania as well. And finally, we've managed to initial and effectively finalize the participation of the Ugandan National Oil Company in the Lake Albert development, which I think is a real milestone for the Ugandan oil and gas industry. The fact that you now have a national oil company that will be present as an active partner in the venture, and that speaks to some of the things that we've touched on earlier in terms of knowledge transfer, participation, transparency, and revenue and value added from the host government perspective. So for sure, it's not been the easiest year we've had. There have been challenges, but despite those, we've made good progress, and we still keep a target for FID in the very near future. So it's been difficult, but we remain very positive.
Okay, and crossing over to Sandra, if you can hear me, a lot of concern online around the fact that countries like Uganda and Kenya made oil discoveries at the time and it was in triple digits per barrel in the price in the global market. Right now, we can't even speak about that. How has this impacted revenue prospects for entities like the Uganda Revenue Authority?
Of course, we've had to recalibrate our economic models because the assumptions that we made then may not hold true right now. But still, the oil price today is better than the oil price the time we signed some of the production sharing agreements, and we still make a profit, and we'll still be able to collect revenue for this country. And of course, the oil prices are volatile, and we expect that the prices will go up again in their usual cyclical manner. And Uganda and Uganda Revenue Authority, or Uganda Revenue Authority and Uganda by extension, will be able to collect petroleum revenues from our resource. However, of course, we have not yet started production in Uganda, so we anticipate that in the next, we hope to take FID before the end of this year, perhaps in December. So within the 3 years that it will take for us to develop the infrastructure that is relevant for us to commercialize the oil and gas prospects, we hope that the price will be up. So for right now, as any responsible tax collectors. We've had to recalibrate and simulate different scenarios. And yes, we are hopeful that we'll be able to still collect revenue at the current oil price.
All right, we have very few minutes remaining, but let me just cross over very quickly to Alvin. A number of issues emerging here. Kenya has not joined the EITI yet, and of course we are still pursuing a number of double taxation treaties. Would you say we are on a dangerous path as far as management of oil revenue is concerned?
Yes, Julian, I think so. Of course, I don't want to be forebearer of bad news. I think that there are things that can be done to be able to avert any potential dangers that the country might be facing. I think joining the EITI program process is one of them, but also I think that being really careful when it comes to the kind of treaty network that the country is entering into. And as you know, if you look at the recent treaties that are being negotiated, the majority of them are with tax havens. We are talking of Singapore, we are talking of Barbados, we are talking of Mauritius. All these are basically creating very, very high risk for the country as it enters into the extractive industry. Lastly, I think the whole conversation around the establishment of the Nairobi International Financial Center, coupled with the discovery of these natural resources, basically calls for even stronger due diligence and more kind of financial intelligence in terms of the kind of financial regulatory framework that we are putting in place that will ensure that the country is not only hemorrhaging the resources that it has discovered, but also is not acting as a magnet for all kind of dirty money from the region. And that is one of the big fears we have, that if you have a poorly regulated international financial center, it is not only dangerous for the Kenyan economy, but it's also dangerous for the region, because what we have seen in other regions where there have been attempts to establish those kinds of systems, if they are poorly regulated, they can be an avenue for drawing in dirty money. And we have seen this. We are surrounded with countries that are unfortunately rather unstable, DRC and others, and therefore it's really upon the government to do his homework well.
Okay. As we get to the close of our conversation, crossing over to Nathan, the energy transition is here with us, and of course, funding for fossil fuel exploration is on a general decline. What do you see as the outlook from a Total perspective?
I think from a Total perspective, we probably focus on the second word that you said, which is transition. We consider ourselves and working towards being, I would say, the responsible energy major, and the key thing is to look across the energy landscape. Our objective is really to provide clean, affordable energy to our clients. So I would say that the range of activities that we're looking at are obviously hydrocarbon-based activities, but increasingly we have a huge focus on lower carbon energy sources, and we've made a big step forwards in developing our renewables business, so wind, solar, also looking at energy efficiency to tackle the issue of climate change from the demand side as well. And so for us, we still feel that there's obviously opportunity, and we think that the mission of providing clean, affordable energy is still the right one to pursue, and that we have the expertise to do it. So we're optimistic about what the energy transition brings, and we fully recognize the need to address the climate challenge, and it's deeply embedded into our strategy looking forward.
All right, I'm told we have about 2 minutes to go. Sandra, your closing thoughts in about a minute, please.
Thank you very much. As I said earlier, we are hopeful that we shall have, that the oil companies shall take the final investment decision. And 3 years from then, Uganda shall become a new oil and gas producer. So, and I think we have negotiated good contracts, upwards of 70% of total government take, a very good achievement for a frontier state like Uganda. We have built capacity at the Uganda Revenue Authority. we are ready to collect the correct petroleum revenues. We are equal to the task, and I want to assure all Ugandans that that listening or watching today that we will collect the correct revenues, and we hopefully will be able to get out of poverty and into middle income status.
All right, and Alvin, 1 minute, your closing remarks.
1 minute. So 4 things which I really try to recap. The first thing that I started. Number 1, I think there's a need to revisit the tax incentive regime that exists in the country, both in the extractive industry, but also broadly in the region. Countries are losing significant amount of money as a result of kind of race to the bottom in providing huge range of tax incentives. That is one. Secondly, there's a need to review the double tax agreements, particularly double tax agreement that have been signed with tax havens or secret jurisdictions, as it were. Thirdly, corporate transparency is very important, bringing in beneficial ownership registry and ensuring that we know who are the beneficial owners of this company. And lastly, investing in capacity of both the executive, but also in the legislative arena, where we need to have our parliament involved more in this kind of contract negotiation and contract transparency. I think those will all be very, very critical if we really have to turn the discovery of natural resources to a blessing and become the middle-income country that the previous speaker was speaking about.
All right, many thanks to our panelists for having this conversation with us regarding revenue management in the oil sector in East Africa. The take-home, I should say, the Uganda Revenue Authority maintains that the transaction between Total and Tullow yielded the best results. To the win-win for the country, $23 million in tax revenue, which is about 4% of the transaction value. Well, the jury's still out there as far as this is concerned. Many thanks to you for being the viewer. NTV News is up next.